Welcome back to Recreating Connections, a Recreation Resources podcast. I'm your host, Alex Gadet. I am the outreach consultant with RRS, and I have my co-host,
Hi, I'm Holly Henry, and I'm the University Program Associate with RRS.
and we're continuing Recreation Resources Service Month with a special guest, the Western Region consultant, Blake Covington. Welcome, Blake.
Hey, happy to be here.
We're so happy to have you. So I guess we're going to kick it right off. Can you tell us a little bit about how you first got into the field of Parks and Recreation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's sort of that tale as old as time, sort of that I was involved of so many different buckets and so many different avenues of just recreation in general. Being involved as a kid, I spent most of my time as a kid outdoors. I grew up in North Carolina, sort of like the triad, as we like to call it, and was just really, really active, being outside all the time, playing sports, swimming in a pool, just sort of every avenue that recreation had to offer, I was sort of involved. And so that's sort of what stemmed into me basically wanting to help provide similar or even better experiences for people out there today, just because of how much it positively impacted me as a young person.
Was there a defining moment or experience early on that made you realize this was the right career path for you?
I would say I don't remember a specific moment, but I think for me, one thing that really stuck out through all of those different involvements and whatnot was just the sense of community that I developed with other people that I was involved in these things with, whether it was from being a participant as a young kid to then having sort of hourly part-time jobs at these things, from being a lifeguard, camp counselor, all those various things that I've worked in my career thus far. The sense of community that I've established in those different organizations and periods of my life have been really, really strong and very transformative. So I think just that sense of community is sort of what's kept me around and sort of kept me in these spaces. Because I think the community that you build as a profession in this field, and then also that you help build with communities that you work in, it's hard to describe and hard to put into words, but very rewarding.
So, what would you say were the most formative jobs or projects that helped shape your career before becoming a consultant?
It's a good question. I could probably talk a lot about various jobs because, like I said, I as a person, I'm someone that is I'm hard to pick things. I'm very interested in so many things, and it's hard for me to pick a lane and stick to that one. So I've had a lot of random um, jobs sort of throughout my life in the field of recreation. But I would say sort of the first one that comes to mind, I was a camp counselor. When I was in college, I went to various camps as a camper, and that was a really, really transformative experience for me as a kid. So I was a camp counselor at various summer camps in North Carolina, and then one on the West Coast as well. And that was really, really forced me to being a camp counselor is very hard if you've never done it before. Recommend, never too late to try. But if you have, you know it's really, really challenging. Where you have the campers that are in your cabin or however, whatever context you're working in. But then it's really the people that you get to work with. I think you encounter people from all walks of life. You're forced to work through some hard moments with people when you're sometimes physically tired, emotionally tired, all the things. But the relationships that you build with those people that you work with in those settings, I think, is again transformative. That's probably a word I'm going to use a lot today during this interview. But yeah, so I would say the various places that I was a camp counselor at, it's really what bonded me to nature and the outdoors and public lands and being able to share that with young people and then the people that I worked with. That was probably a really, really big one, even though multiple jobs were spent under that umbrella. And then probably the other one, I spent some time in the U.S. Peace Corps a number of years ago, and that was a big chunk of my life and a very formative chapter. As I say, I could probably talk about that forever, but we'll keep it short for today's purposes. But all that to say, I was in a pretty rural area when I was in the Peace Corps, and one of the projects that we sort of did when I was a volunteer is we built a sidewalk, which I know when we sort of hear that here in the US, we think, oh, sidewalks are everywhere, which is true here. But when you think about it elsewhere, sidewalks are not always. And
Exactly.
the amount of effort and community organizing and logistics and all sorts of things just to sort of build a sidewalk. And the sidewalk was attached to the school that I was working at and attached to the village. And I think we take a lot of things for granted, but especially having something to sort of walk on, especially if it's during a rainy season, which there was a rainy season where I was living. I was in Fiji. And so building a sidewalk and seeing all the various partnerships and stakeholders come to play to put together a sidewalk, get it completed. And I envision the sidewalk is still there, hopefully, and hopefully lots of people walk across it every single day. That was a really big project for me, even though small scale, it could have been seen as a little bit smaller. But and I use that a lot in my role with RRS today too, just sort of the peacemaking and putting the puzzle pieces together to get something accomplished.
That's great. So I feel like we need a whole episode to Peace Corps. Like,
it
honestly,
yeah, if you ever need another podcast episode or something like that, you can call me and we can talk about
we're
We
definitely
would
going to do
really
that.
love that, honestly. Yeah.
So I feel like this is one of the most interesting parts of these interviews are really just asking people how they got into their role with RRS. You talked about being a camp counselor, you talked about being in the Peace Corps. How did you transition into this role of being the Western Region consultant?
Yeah, I it was very random, I will be honest. I had never heard of RRS before. I'm at UNC State. I have a lot of family members that have gone that are Wolfpack alumni, even though I was a Tar Heel fan, even though I'm not supposed to say that out loud. But yeah, so I had heard about State's PRTM academic program, and I was working in higher education as well. I was working at UNC Asheville and did a couple of different roles when I was there for a couple of years, but primarily in campus recreation, so higher ed, collegiate recreation, and then taught a couple of classes and adjunct faculty member as well. But I think after having been there for a number of years, I was looking maybe at potentially expanding sort of what I was doing. I talked a little bit earlier about having trouble picking a lane, what I wanted to work in, and I remember an old faculty or an old professor of mine actually sent me this job posting. Just thought it looked interesting, and I read through the application and talked about grants, talked about just some other sort of community development work. And I'll be honest, I did not have high hopes. I thought I didn't meet the qualifications. I really didn't expect to even get sort of an interview or anything like that. I just thought the job seemed very interesting, and I wanted to know a little bit more about it. And I was in a good position. I really liked my job, and I liked the community that I had before professionally. So I wasn't going to be really upset or anything, but I applied and ended up somehow we made it through and have been here for a couple of years now. And it's one of my favorite jobs that I've ever had for a plethora of reasons.
I'm gonna go off script real quick and just say I thought during the interview process it was kind of funny because mine was the same way. I didn't know too much about
Right.
RRS, and I feel
Hmm.
like this podcast is like so great because it's giving people an opportunity to actually see in depth what we do. We're kind of
Right.
explaining to other people who we are and things like that, so
Yeah.
people get to see it.
Yeah. And
That's
I think
great.
RRS has grown so much since even Alex, you and I, because we came around on the same time.
Hmm.
And I think RRS has just grown in all that we do and the people that know who we are, even in just those couple of years. So,
Definitely. So you talked about your project with the Peace Corps, but in your consultant role, what work have you done in the past that kind of translates to the work you do now?
yeah, I mean, both personally and professionally, I've always said, and I talk about this sort of all the time, and I'm really big on relationships, whether that's one-on-one or with groups, going back to that sense of community that I talked about earlier. Relationship building has sort of been my guiding light with everything that I do. I really, really enjoy building and maintaining authentic relationships. And I think that's a huge part of this role. Building relationships with the communities that you serve, because we serve entire regions, and that can look different depending on communities and cultures and whatnot, depending on who you're working with. So I think just that relationship building is sort of a key and something that overlaps and sort of is woven throughout all the jobs that I've had. And then obviously the sort of technical side of being in the recreation field, being an aquatics director who oversaw aquatics facility stuff, fitness administration, whatnot, was something. And then being involved in the outdoor recreation, outdoor education field a little bit too, you get sort of that side of it. So I like to sort of say that RS, it's this big umbrella that covers all these other little jobs that I've had, and I get to bring the experience from all those little things into this role to hopefully touch on any sort of issue or any sort of thing that I'm working on with any sort of community.
Right, for sure. So, what excites you most about serving the western part of the state and working with communities there?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I like I said, I'm from the middle of the state of North Carolina. I'm in the Triad area, and the mountains aren't too terribly far from that. But I consider Western North Carolina my home. It's where I've done all of my higher education, so undergrad, graduate degree, and I've been here now. I think I just clocked it for maybe 10 years, 11 years in total. Which for Western North Carolina, if you're not from there, that is a bit of a long time for someone to stay. People either stay forever once they get here or they stay for a little bit and then leave. So it does have a transient nature to it. So I truly feel like it's my home, and I've settled, and it's where I grew up in a lot of ways. And so I consider it my home. So to get to work all across the region is something that's very special. Because I think when people think of Western North Carolina, they, especially if they are traveling or tourists, because that's a big part of our economy and what we have to offer. But I think we always associate it with, oh, Asheville, or maybe sometimes Boone because of Appalachian State. But Western North Carolina is so diverse in so many different ways all across the region. You could travel a couple of hours west towards like Cherokee County, whatnot, and you'll see certain things there, certain communities there, and then travel a little bit further north in different areas. So it's just so much more diverse than I think we sort of think it is. And to live in a place and work in a place that is sort of seen as the destination in and of itself, I think that's really, really interesting to get to be there and see it during the periods of the year that aren't busy or aren't flooded with people coming to visit and go on these hikes or all of these different things that people do.
Well, yeah, you talked about like unique characteristics of Western North Carolina. Do you have any challenges as far as working there? What is your biggest challenge as far as serving that
Yeah,
region?
I mean, it's a good question too. I going back to I think I mentioned this during one of the questions too, but even though Western North Carolina as is a region and it's considered Appalachia, the culture amongst different parts of that region and different counties and different towns and all that good stuff, it's so different from one town to the other. So you could have one county and then a town in the northern part versus the southern part, and they don't really talk to each other. They don't really know what's going on, and their culture in that small community is really different. So I think sometimes getting to be involved in so many different communities and know what's going on in Northwest North Carolina versus far west Western North Carolina, getting to sort of connect those dots with people, because I think there is both a lot more overlap than a lot of people realize, but also some unique differences among everyone. And these unique differences are really interesting, and I think are what makes us the region that we are.
Yeah, and I feel like that kind of answers my next question as far as how do you kind of support local parks and recreation. I feel like you kind of bridge the gap. I know like during certain
Mm-hmm.
conferences, you'll often go and have a Western North Carolina side. Y'all will meet up and discuss everything that's
Yep.
going on in your region, which I feel like is great. I feel like more regions need to do that. I feel like that answers my next question as far as how do you particularly in particular support and serve that community or serve those communities over there. So that's great.
Right.
It's kind of
Yeah, I
a
mean,
kudos to you.
exactly sort of answered it. When people, I still haven't perfected my sort of elevator pitch for this job when I tell people, friends or other people, what I do. And the way that I sort of think about it or summarize is basically I like to think of myself as the glue between all of these communities and as the sort of thing that can connect the dots for certain people. Because, when you're working for a Parks and Rec department or working for a nonprofit or land conservation organization or whatever it is, you're really ingrained in what you're doing because the work is taxing and there's a lot to do, especially in the most recent period that West North Carolina has been through. So to be able to have that outside perspective and know what's going on in so many different communities, it's really easy for me to help to connect the dots. Because like I said before, a lot of them are facing similar issues and could really help and benefit from creating a little bit more partnership between everyone. And I like to think that's sort of the role that I fill.
Definitely. So, in your time as consultant, give a success story that you've had so far.
Yeah, the first one that came to mind. So one of our big things that we do in this job is we are sort of the field representatives for the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is a federal grant program. And a subset of that is the Outdoor Recreation Legacy Partnership Program, which is a grant program underneath that umbrella that serves what they call underserved communities. And you have to qualify for it for various things. But I remember probably maybe a couple of weeks or a month or two into the job when I first started with RS, I got a call from someone from the Southern Appalachians Highlands Conservancy about a potential land acquisition project in Buncombe County. And at that point, I was a deer in headlights. I feel I didn't have any idea what I was doing, let alone I had never worked on a land acquisition project before. I had some experience with federal grants, but not this one. So I was still learning all these things. But it was a project of a potential, I think, 345-acre land acquisition, Beaver View Mountain, for people that are familiar with it, in Buncombe County. But it was really cool because I used to live in the Beaver View area for about a year when I first moved back to Western North Carolina from the Peace Corps. So I felt very connected to that area of the county. Um, and so I just remember getting a phone call about that. And that project has sort of been an ongoing thing from basically my time with when I started with RRS to now. And we recently, Buncombe County recently got the contract for that project which means that it was awarded and the project will come to fruition, pending no derailments or anything like that. But basically, the county did get that grant to conserve that 345-acre piece of property that they're going to end up turning into some sort of local park in the future. And land is tough to find anywhere really, but especially in Buncombe County, something that's sort of untouched like that one is, and to being able to conserve it for things like hiking or just a place where people can go that's not too far from town, especially in an underserved area. That was a rewarding project because federal grants are no joke. There's a lot of work, a lot of back and forth, a lot of hurry up and wait. So to come out of that on the other end after so long leading up to it was really, really exciting.
So, Blake, what do you like to do outside of RRS? What are some of the biggest adventures that you've ever had? Like, give us a little
Ooh,
glimpse of what you like to do in your spare time.
okay. So
I'm just
obviously it
gonna put
probably
you on
goes
the
with,
spot.
yeah, it probably goes without saying. Unfortunately, a lot of what I do like to do in my personal time is enjoy these things that I get to work on, which is a fun juxtaposition. So I love the outdoors. I like to go hiking, biking. I like to spend as much time in and around water as I can. Um, any of that sort of stuff. I have a dog, and so he keeps me busy. He likes to inspect all of the greenways and things like that that we get to work on. So that's really fun. But I also like to travel. I like to read. I'm a big music fan as well. But anything outside, usually I'm in and willing to go in on. But I would say aside from Parks and Rec stuff, yeah, travel, reading, music, good food. Um, those are my favorite things.
I love those things too.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that's gonna wrap us up right now, but like we're gonna have you back on for Peace Corps talk.
Please,
Yeah,
please.
it was a transformative, like I said, again, use the word transformative, so I'll finish with that. It was a transformative period and lots to be learned in small scale individually and larger scale from there on.
Absolutely. Well, guys, we thank y'all for listening. We have more RS consultants coming up later for our Recreation Resources Service Month. So thank y'all for listening, and thank you, Blake, for coming on with us.
Thank you,
Happy to be
Blake.
here.